To make brioche bread rolls, which are a little bit richer, a little bit sweeter than ordinary bread rolls and often used as burger buns, you're going to need 250 grams of strong white bread flour, a heaped teaspoon of yeast, that's about half a sachet, if you're using the little sachet, so that goes in with the flour straight away, half a teaspoon of salt, so that's going to go in as well, and I'm just going to mix those through. We can use a spoon, a knife, anything to do that. I'm just using my whisk because I'm going to use that for my egg in a minute. So while I'm at it, I'm going to beat the egg ready. I'm doing it in a measuring jug because it'll be easier to pour for the next step. So beat the egg, pour for a whisk, add 1.5 tablespoons, that's all, of milk, mix that in, and I'm also going to add about 100 ml of lukewarm water. Keep an extra 20 or so spare, ready warmed. You might need it, you might not. It does depend on the size of the egg.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Right, so the next thing I'm going to do, put that to one side for the moment. Next thing I'm going to do is take approximately 20 grams, which is a lump of butter, which I've diced up. And that's going to be rubbed in the same style that you would if you were making any rubbed in recipe like a pastry. So rub that in until those lumps disappear. There's not a lot there, so it shouldn't take very long, although this butter's quite cold, so it'll take me a minute. So once you've rubbed in butter, don't be too fussy. If there's a few small lumps, it doesn't matter. They'll mix in afterwards when you're mixing and kneading. Then I'm going to add a tablespoon, which is about 15 grams of caster sugar, and just give that a quick mix through. So just at this point, check I'm going to need large pieces of butter. And that's about it. So my next step, I'm just going to make a well in the centre, and I'm going to add in almost all. I'm just going to keep a little bit back, just in case. It's much easier to add a little bit more than to have a really sticky dough and have to add flour to it. So just using a dinner knife, a blunt knife, and going right round the edge, right to the bottom. I can see now that it's going to need the rest of that. And what I'm then going to do is have the extra 20 ml of water that was on top of the 100 that I put in. Use it just to swish out the egg that's remaining in your jug or your bowl. And see if you need any of it. Just going to put a little where there's still some floury dry mixture. It should be a little bit wetter than your usual bread mix, but you don't want it cake soft. So it should still be a mixture that you can pick up in one lump. Shouldn't be runny, shouldn't be drippy, but it should also not be dry and crumbly. So I'm just going to give it a bit of a mix in the bowl. Then I'm going to sprinkle some flour. Put a bit more than you think you need. Sweep it out of your way, just dust it around. Get all of that dough out. Go back, scrape out your bowl. I'm now going to quickly put this bowl to wash because I'm going to need that again to put my dough to rise. So at this point, I'm just going to coat it in the flour just to roll it around a little so I can touch it without getting sticky dough all over me, and get it nicely touchable. Okay, so my next step now is to just get that dough and knead it, so the same method as kneading pizza dough or bread rolls, ordinary bread rolls or cinnamon buns, and knead it, folding it, squashing it, keep it going. It is quite sticky, but I don't want to dry it out by adding too much flour, so every now and then I'm just going to dip my hands in flour, pat it off, and just give that a good mix, good knead for up to 5 minutes. Roll it, fold, fold, roll it out. So just keep it moving, keep folding it to get that nice and elastic. See, it's sticking, but if you roll back over it, it will go back into the dough. So once you've kneaded it for a few minutes, it should still be quite soft, but it should be a little bit more elastic, and if you pull it out, it'll shrink back in. And next thing I'm going to do, wash my bowl. I'm going to put a little bit of oil in the bowl, brush it around, and that's just going to make it come out easily later. I've got the size because it will rise quite a bit, hopefully. Drop it in, and I'm then going to cover it with cling film, or you could use a damp tea towel, and I'm going to leave it to rise. Could be an hour. It's not very warm in the kitchen today, so it might well take quite a while. So that's covered in cling film, and that's ready now to put it in a warm place and just leave it. Right, so this dough has now had an hour and a half rising time. I'm going to add a little more flour to my workspace, and you can see that it's quite a bit bigger than it was. It should come out quite nicely because I oiled the bowl. And what you'll see then, there's a lot of air bubbles, but it will then start to collapse as soon as you start touching it. So you're just going to give it another couple of minutes kneading. During this time, obviously, it'll flatten out again. It's going to have some more rising time before it goes in the oven. So you do need to allow quite a lot of time to make bread, to make it really good and rise well. It should be quite nice and smooth now. But again, just bring in a little bit of flour as required. So once it's kneaded, we're going to divide it up. You can make 4 or 6. I think I'm going to go for 4 for this one, so I want them quite large. So I'm going to make it into a circle to start with. Then I'm going to use a palette knife, mark a cross in the centre, and then press down and wiggle the knife so you get a nice clean cut. Now they might not look very big at the moment. They should rise. They'll rise before they go in the oven. They'll rise in the oven. You might be able to see some little air bubbles. I don't know if you can in this light. So then I'm going to do some fingertip kneading to shape them. So you've got your 4 triangles. Put them non-sticky side down, and then flour your fingertips. Bring the sides up into the middle So you cover in that sticky cut edge, pinch it together in a sort of little dumpling style, and any of those messy pinched bits, you're going to turn it upside down and have a really nice smooth surface. So all I'm going to do then is just to flatten it out a little, not rolling it or getting it really thin. You can see it's still quite thick, but as it's going to rise up, if you don't flatten it out to start with, they end up quite round like a ball rather than a roll that's easy to cut in half. Last thing, I'm going to go onto my tray. Once I've done this to all 4 of them, I'm going to loosely cover them with cling film and leave them for another hour or so. So again, the warmer the room, the quicker it's going to rise. These should come out quite big. I could have made 6. I could have made 8 smaller ones, so it's totally up to you. You could shape them to make them into hot dog rolls. That's another option. So they're on the tray. I'm just going to sprinkle them with a tiny bit of flour and rub that over. That's just going to stop the cling film sticking. Most of that will get absorbed, and I'm going to glaze them before they go in the oven anyway. Get a bit of cling film, or again a damp cloth, and loosely cover them this time. If you tuck it up tight, they won't have any space to rise, so just loosely arrange the cling film over them. That's just to stop them drying out, and to help to keep them warm, I'm also going to put a cloth over them. So again, another hour, maybe hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. So when they're ready, they're ready. You can't really rush the yeast rising. These have now had just over an hour rising. See, they've grown a bit, and if you feel them from the sides, just give them a little squeeze. They should feel nice and puffy. Optional now, you can glaze with egg or milk or a mixture. I'm just going to use a little bit of milk. Just lightly brush it over. You don't want to knock out any of the air that's built up. If you wanted to at this point, you could also sprinkle some sesame seeds over them to give that proper burger bun look. Obviously you need to do that quite quickly before, if you're using milk, it'll dry out. Egg, you've got a little bit longer to work with. And these are now going to go in the oven. They're going to take 15 to 20 minutes, 200 degrees. And I'm also going to put about a cup of water. I'm going to just throw it into a tray at the bottom of the oven to create a bit of steam to help with the rising. Right, they've had 15 minutes and I'm happy with the colour. If I'd used an egg glaze, it would have been shinier. This has just got a nice golden colour. Pick one up. Should sound quite hollow if you tap underneath with your fingers. So they obviously need to be left to cool down now. They're going to go onto the cooling rack, and I'm going to leave them probably for about half an hour to cool properly.